Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today I have another top 12 Recs video for you. I feel like it's been a minute since I filmed one of these, but we had to do something summary for a 12 Recs video. And if y'all know about the tropes that I love, you know I will always, without a doubt, every single time pick up a book that is set at a summer camp, that is set at a cabin. Any like camping kind of slasher just gives me all the nostalgic vibes of being a little child and watching the Friday the 13th movies way before I should have. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the top 12 best summer camp slash cabin horror and thriller recs. We have everything from slashers to very intense psychological thrillers in here. So we kind of just run the whole gamut. I have like my little summer camp braids on. I have my little Pride Month hat on. I feel like a very like camp, little summer camp girl. So let's go ahead and get into the recs. As always, I'll be sharing 12 in this video, but if you want 4 more bonus recommendations, and I try to make those like the spiciest, the most niche, the best recs, I will link the extended cut of this video down below, which will be available on Patreon for all of my tiers, even my very lowest at $3.99 a month. Not only do you get access to the extended cut of this video, but all of my extended cuts for every single sit down video that I've filmed. So let's get into my top 12. This is in no particular order, by the way, if you've never seen one of my top 12 videos. I want to start out with a more recent read that I feel like people wouldn't know unless you read it, that it fits in this category. So if you're looking for this vibe, you might not be drawn to this book, but it's a good one for it. And that is Good Girls Don't Die by Christina Henry. This is one of my favorite thrillers of the year. I give it 5 stars and I absolutely loved it because I love the way that this is like a bunch of vignettes that don't really fit together that all come together in a really great way at the end. There was commentary, but it wasn't like smacking you over the head with it, you know? It just felt like very natural to the story. So basically we're following 3 women in 3 separate situations. The first woman wakes up basically with amnesia and she has no idea how she ended up in this like too perfect, like creepily perfect kind of life in town. This other girl wakes up basically in a like post-apocalyptic weird dystopian world, and then the girl in the middle, which was my favorite girl to follow, is basically in the plot of Friday the 13th, where she is a little college girl going on a little cabin getaway for her birthday with her friends, and it turns into a slasher. So you get about 100 pages of each of those storylines, and then you see how they all come together at the end. Obviously the whole thing doesn't take place at the cabin, but a big chunk of it does, and so I feel like it definitely belongs in this category. Also, the vibes there were just immaculate, and I like that it was switching it up. Like, this is just not your straightforward cabin slasher. This has a little bit more to say, and obviously with the multiple storylines there's a lot more to it. I absolutely loved it. If you're looking for those vibes but you kind of get bored of it after 100 or so pages, this is perfect for you. Next up, I have a classic, and that is The Troop by Nick Cutter. Now this book is pretty gross, pretty intense, but I also feel like it is very well loved, and it is by me as well. I believe I give it 4.5 out of 5 stars when I read it in a vlog last summer, or no, the summer before. If you're unaware, this book follows a Boy Scout troop going camping, and they come across a weird man in the woods. They don't really know his deal, if he's just like this homeless wandering man, or if maybe like he has like something deeper going on. Other things start to unfold that kind of set up everyone's red flags throughout the course of the camping trip. People start to get sick, people start to drop dead, and and it's kind of like a Lord of the Flies-esque situation. This book has like the camping horror vibes, but it's a little bit of a twist where we're not just following like a masked slasher. We are following this psychological horror of what it's like for these literal children to like break down over the course of this camping trip. It's really cool. There's like good media in here. I really liked the audiobook for this one. Like there's like evidence logs and case files and stuff. It's really cool. And obviously perfect to read in the summer, especially if you're going on a camping trip. I feel like that's the scariest way you could ever read this book. Now, if you're looking for a classic like masked killer at a summer camp kind of a vibe, you're going to love the Camp Slaughter series by Sergio Gomez. This is the second one in the series, Halloween Slaughter, which obviously it takes place on Halloween if you are looking for that. But the first book in the series is Camp Slaughter, and it just takes place at an old abandoned camp that is now like turned into cabin Airbnb kind of things. We are following our masked villain. He's a cannibal, he's a serial killer, he has some trauma going on, and we learn a lot more about the villain's backstory than just like this crazed killer going on a rampage. And I really loved it. When I read the first one, it got me out of a slump and I was like, immediately I'm in. And when I picked up the second one, I was sold even more on the development of this villain. I love that the series follows a villain and the main characters that are getting slashed are just kind of expendable. It feels really close to the nostalgic 80s slashers that I used to watch all the time growing up. And the final slaughter literally just came out like a month or so ago, so I have it on my Kindle. I'm so excited to read it. Next up, let's talk about a recent read for me, and that is Kill River by Cameron Rubik. This is also a series. I've only read the first one, so that's the only one that I can recommend to you, but I really loved it. It felt like a classic 80s slasher, like down to the language that was used, down to the writing style, the vibes, like everything felt like reading a Fear Street book or something. Like it actually felt like R.L. Stine. Like I don't know how else to describe it to you. It literally feels like that. And there are some like I would not call them problematic, but you know, it's like true to the 80s, if you know what I mean. There were a few, I would not call them homophobic, okay? As a queer person, I was not offended in the slightest, but there were a few things like, bruh, I'm not gay, you know, like those type of jokes, but I didn't feel like they were malicious at all. I feel like if anything, it just was like poking fun at the 80s-ness of it all. Like the whole thing is just very vintage, which I absolutely loved. Our main character the whole time is like obsessed with listening to her Walkman and like playing little tapes and stuff like that. She loves the Go-Go's, and we are following her as she gets sent to this camp, and it's really for younger kids. Like most of the kids there are like 8 to 10 or 12, and she's 13, so she's like, why am I literally here surrounded by babies? So her and the few other older kids get together and they start to kind of get into trouble. They quickly get into more trouble than they were bargaining for when they start getting stalked by a killer. And this doesn't all just happen at the summer camp. The first part of the book is at the camp, but then we quickly transition into like walking through the woods, and it feels like a little bit of survival horror. And then the whole reason why it's called Kill River is because a lot of the story takes place at an abandoned amusement park in the woods outside of the camp, where there's like all these water rides, like massive water slides that are abandoned, and like people are getting slashed and getting drowned in the water. It's so classic vintage slasher fun. I cannot believe that this is like a modern book. I am absolutely obsessed with it. I can't wait to read the rest of the series. My only gripe is it was a little bit long, and actually I feel that way about the Slaughter books as well. Both of those series could maybe benefit from a little bit of editing down, like a little bit of a faster pace, but because I love the book so much, I'm willing to read more of it. Next up, I have to recommend the book that I feel like everyone knew was gonna be in this video, so I'll just talk about it briefly because I've recommended it a million times, but I love it so much. It's just my perfect brand of weird, and that is The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. In this book, we're following a non-binary main character, and their sister actually died, and they are wondering what actually happened to their sister. They feel like no one is really telling them the truth, so they go to their sister's old summer camp to investigate and like talk to her old friends who are the Honeys. Okay, so it's kind of like the Heathers, or this is like a YA version of like Bunny set at a summer camp. If you have read Bunny by Mona Awad, which is one of my favorite books of all time, it gets weird, it gets trippy, it's very queer, it's very summer camp horror vibes, and I just love everything about this book. It is so good. I actually feel like I want to raise my rating because I find myself thinking about this book a lot. I find myself recommending it a lot. I just feel like this is very essential queer horror summer reading. If you like all of those categories, you will like this. Next up, let's talk about The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This was recently adapted into a movie called Knock at the Cabin, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. I love the adaptation, so I highly recommend that you watch and read this one, but if you just want to read it, you will be getting into following this sweet little family who goes to this cabin getaway over the summer, and very quickly they are met with some strangers at their door. And these are not just like Jehovah's Witnesses, okay? These are not just people you can be like, okay, thank you, no thank you, like goodbye. These are people who say that they're the bringers of the apocalypse. So this sweet little family, it's a gay couple, two dads and their little daughter, are told that in order to prevent the end of the world, one of them has to kill another member of their family. If you like moral dilemma horror, if you like psychological horror, you will love this one. And if you are someone like me where you're a reader but not a lot of other people in your life are readers, I feel like you can get people on board and like connect with them, like share in the story if you read it and then you get everyone else to watch the adaptation. That's what I've done, and I've loved the discussions with the non-readers in my life, and I just love that they adapted this book. I hope they adapt more Paul Tremblay books too. Next up, let's talk about My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This one is super 80s, almost like Stranger Things vibes, and it doesn't really take place at a summer camp, but some of the pivotal scenes happen in this cabin on the outskirts of their town on a little lake, so I feel like it counts. Also, this is one of the only horror books that has ever made me cry, so I'm gonna force it to count. Also, I haven't recommended it in a while, so I feel like I need to remind you how phenomenal this book is. If you haven't read it yet, now is the time. This is the perfect summer book. It's about two girls, really, and their best friendship. And female friendship is hard, you know, it's hard to navigate, but these two girls are trying to do it until one of them starts acting weird. And the other one is like, girl, Loki, I really think you're possessed. Basically, they do drugs at this cabin, and ever since then, her best friend is just acting off her rocker. So we follow this relationship between the two girls throughout the story. It's about friendship, it's about growing up. There are so many just gut-wrenching scenes in this book. It was so emotional, and yes, it was horrifying in the way that Grady Hendrix writes great, gross horror, but the psychological stuff really stood out to me as well, and the nostalgic 80s summer vibes were also just immaculate. That I feel like it belongs in this video. Next up, we have a thriller, and that is Stillhouse Lake by Rachel Kane. This one is actually also a series. I've read the first 3 books in this series, so I haven't finished it yet, but I really liked the 3 that I've read. I think you can definitely read the first one just as a standalone and kind of like be done with it, because they do tend to get like a little bit more like draggy and boring as you go into it, but I wouldn't say they're bad books. In the first one, we're following this family who they're not in the witness protection program, but they kind of have to go off the grid because the patriarch of the family has been exposed as a serial killer. So the mom's like, shit, our entire lives are turned upside down. I have to take my kids and go off the map, because the general public really believes that the family of this man had had to have known that the murders were happening. So everyone hates them, everyone is out to get this family, and they just move to this secluded cabin on a lake, but they are fearing for their lives because they think that their dad is going to come for them or send someone for them from prison. And the whole like public is against them too. Really everyone is out to get this family. So we are following the very fast-paced, very twisty thriller plot that unfolds in the aftermath of this man getting caught. I think it's such an interesting concept because usually we might follow like the dad and the killings and all of that up till the arrest, but this thriller is more about the aftermath of a serial killer, which I think is so unique and so well done. It has really great like cabin lakeside vibes if you like that, which obviously if you clicked on this video, that's what you're looking for. This is absolutely perfect. I also just really like the way that Rachel Kane wrote these characters. I feel like you can really get to know them on a deep level, and if you know me and you know my reading taste, you know I love a character-driven book. Next up, let's talk about a recent read, and that is The Summer Is Ended, But We Are Not Yet Saved by Joey Como. You probably recognize this author's name from one of my favorite books of all time, which is One Bloody Thing After Another. Joey Como writes kind of like short, weird, queer horror books, so really perfect for me, right up my alley. And this book is pretty tricky to find. I feel like the only physical copies that are available are like $300 or something crazy. I was able to find it on the internet because I really wanted to track down this book. So if you're determined enough, you can find a copy, but just so you know, this one is not as accessible. But I had to mention it because number one, I feel like nobody knows about it because it is so inaccessible. Hopefully it gets re-released. But number two, it is so great. Kind of along the same lines of One Bloody Thing After Another, we're following a younger queer character. So we're following this, I think he's like a 12, like 11 or 12-year-old boy, and he is queer and he's figuring things out, but his parents send him to Bible camp. Maybe a common experience, maybe a traumatizing experience for a lot of queer kids being sent to a church camp over the summer. So we see him going through that on a personal level, and it's very like nostalgic horror vibes as well. It feels like your traditional summer camp slasher, but there's like a bigger conspiracy going on at the camp. Not too deep, very clear-cut commentary on homophobia, especially within the church. It is pretty intense horror. Obviously, like the slashing is being done at a kids camp, so if you're not okay with reading death of children, then just kind of like be aware of that. I noticed that in a lot of the reviews, people are like, I don't want to hear about 12-year-olds getting murdered, and it's like, you literally picked up a slash and it said the main character was 12, so I don't know what you were expecting. Also, I think it's kind of weird that like we're following 13, 14, 16-year-olds in Kill River and none of the reviews are like that, but then you just make the character 12 and like all of a sudden people have issues. There's not sexual violence that is over the top in this book. There is some commentary on, you know, the church, young boys. I feel like that is worthwhile commentary that we need to talk about, but it's nothing super gratuitous. So kind of look out for trigger warnings, but also, you know what you're getting into with this one. If you don't like those things, don't read it. If you want a queer commentary heavy slasher set in the 80s at a summer camp, you will love this one. Next up, I have two books by the same author, one of my favorite authors. If you know me, you know I love Riley Sager. I feel like Riley Sager does this atmosphere so well. The vintage vibes, the lake vibes, the campy vibes, like all of it. Riley Sager is serving the girls. Okay, Riley Sager's bratcore. Like, I don't know why. In my head, this is headcanon for me, Riley Sager lore. Riley Sager loves the Brat album. He's bratcore. Like, that's just what I think. Confirm or deny in the comments, Riley Sager. Can you imagine if he was like, yeah, I'm a rat. Are you bumping that? Okay, sorry, I will die. My favorite of all of the Riley Sager books is this very unhinged novel, which takes place in a luxury cabin at a luxury community on a luxury high-end lake. And that is The House Across the Lake I love this book. It has every thriller trope, every like classic thriller trope in here. It just like campifies it, okay? It like takes everything up to 100. I feel like this is a like Ruth Ware or Megan Miranda thriller dressed up and put on Drag Race. Like that is the best way that I can describe this book. You have to be okay with campiness. You have to be okay with ridiculousness. If you want something unhinged and just straight up fun with the same like campy vibes and over the top thriller tropes, that is my pitch for this book. Basically, we're following a jilted star, okay? She's been dealing with addiction. She lost her husband, and her mom is like, listen, girl, you're literally a celebrity. Like, you can't be doing this and embarrassing yourself and the family in public. So go stay at our little cabin, get it together, and then just come back. Rehab, I guess, just wasn't an option. So she is here at the cabin, super paranoid, okay? She hasn't stopped drinking. She hasn't stopped popping her little pills. She's just doing her thing, very Bradcore. And she sees the people across the lake. She sees something happen to the wife in this cabin. She believes that the husband killed her, but she's not to be trusted. Okay, she's a very unreliable narrator. So we have to figure out what exactly happened here. There are crazy, insane twists. This is a draggy thriller. Okay, so just be prepared for that. It's unhinged, it's crazy. I'm absolutely obsessed with it, in love with it. Could not love anything on this list maybe more than I love this book, but also it's not for everyone. So be aware of that. And my other Riley Sager rec that fits into this category is obviously The Last Time I Lied. Now this one takes place at a summer camp. A massacre occurred at the summer camp years and years ago, or what was assumed to be a massacre, because all of these little girls just vanished from the camp. So it's like, they definitely died, right? Well, we don't really know, but that's what we assume. However, years and years later, this camp is reopening, and one of the surviving girls who did not vanish is asked to come back. So we are digging into what actually happened in the past at the camp, and also creepy things are happening with our main character in current day at the camp. It's a lot of dual timeline going back and forth, the nostalgia, because I believe the first time they were at the camp was like 80s, 90s? I don't know, maybe it's early 2000s. I can't really remember, but it's like a nostalgic feel for the flashback chapters, and then we also have like the campy setting in the current day chapters as well. Great vibes, great characterizations, great twists. I think this is maybe my favorite Riley Sager killer reveal, is the one in this book. So can't go wrong with Riley Sager. If you're looking for camp or cabin thrillers and horror, these two are my favorite of his. And we're all the way to my last book, unless you go watch the extended cut on Patreon, which you totally should, because I really like the 4 recommendations that I'm giving over there, so go watch it. Okay, goodbye. The last book that I have to share with you in this main video is You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Bayron. And this is a YA slasher that takes place on a, not like a summer camp, but like a camp horror experience. Okay, so people don't stay here for like the whole summer, but they'll like book a little trip to stay at this like, oh my god, Friday the 13th like final girl experience, which if this existed, I would totally go. So we're following the staff at the camp as the show, the fake slashing, is not really going off normally. People are actually dying at this horror experience, which is obviously supposed to be all fake. We're also following the dynamics of the staff, which are really interesting. It's a mostly queer cast, which I absolutely love. Love our main character, love the just like campy atmosphere of it. Like all the teens that are working on staff are horror obsessed. Obviously that's why they work at a horror camp, so it feels like very relatable. There is some ridiculousness at the end of this book that I wasn't even necessarily prepared for, so prepare yourself for speculative, ridiculous, not really believable, over the top. I didn't give this one 5 stars for those reasons. I feel like it was a little not as fleshed out as I wanted it to be, and it hit with a little bit of an abruptness. So know that if that kind of an ending is not your thing, you might not love this one. But regardless of, even though that ending didn't hit for me, I still really liked my experience of reading it. It's like 200 something pages, barely. So super quick read, super summery. It's made for queer horror fans like me and probably like you, so highly recommend it. And those are all of the camp/cabin recommendations that I have for you for this top 12 video. Go check out the extended cut if you want over on my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I hope you guys are having an amazing summer. I hope you guys are having a brat summer. I absolutely love you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Just don't forget to read a book and go to therapy this week. Okay, see you next time. Bye.